Much ado about nothing. That was Shakespeare. The same can be said of Bomas of Kenya. The talks at Bomas of Kenya are a much ado about nothing. In fact, the talks are a betrayal to the people of Kenya. The talks at Bomas have been reduced into a parliamentary talk shop. The issues over which people demonstrated, over which there was mass action, the issues over which people went to the streets, knowing all too well they could die, and indeed the issues over which people died, over which people have been buried, the issues over which people have been maimed and crippled, the issues over which there are people in hospital as we speak today, those issues are not being canvassed at Bomas of Kenya. The moment Raila led Azimio were either hoodwinked or agreed or misled or mischievously allowed it to happen. The moment they allowed this thing to be taken to Parliament, the so-called anchoring into law, however clumsy that may look, the moment that happened, all the issues for which the people of Kenya went to the streets, all those issues were tossed through the window. Let us not beat about the bush. Let's be honest with ourselves and to each other. People went to the streets knowing the dangers of doing so because they were angry. Yes, people were angry about food, but that's not the major reason. We heard people talk on television in interviews. We heard people say they knew the dangers and they were ready to pay the ultimate price. And many paid the ultimate price. People did not go to the streets with the danger of dying because of those things listed for discussion at Bomas. The people went to the streets because of what they perceived to be a stolen election. For that, they were prepared to die. And none of the issues that surround a stolen election are at table at Bomas. And let me explain. If the main issue was about a stolen election, electoral fraud, that cannot be discussed at Bomas within the confines of the law, leave alone the confines of Parliament. You cannot, within a legal framework, within the confines of the law, as indeed these talks now are, you cannot discuss President Ruto's election. Ruto went to an election with Raila Odinga. He was declared winner. It was contested. It went to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court ruled William Samoei Arap Ruto was duly elected. And then he was sworn in. Period. You cannot discuss the presidency again. So issues of legitimacy of Ruto's presidency cannot be handled at Bomas. And yet that's why people died. So by allowing themselves to be boxed within the provisions of the law and to operate within the constraints and the restraints in Bomas, the main issue for which people were ready to die and indeed others died cannot be discussed at Bomas. You can see why this is a betrayal to the people who fought so hard to achieve electoral justice. So what is at Bomas? Yet another betrayal. The issues to be discussed at Bomas, first of all, are not in the interest of Mwananchi. The closest there is to the interest of Mwananchi is about cost of living. It is been handled so vaguely under Article 43, blah, 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 so vaguely, because the government side did not want to discuss it, and for good reason. There might be very little to discuss. Desirable as it is, it can only be the good byproduct of a serious discussion when Kenyans are discussing very serious things that are no longer going to be discussed at Bomas. Then at some point they say, let's pause this. As we talk here in Bomas, our people are dying outside there from hunger. Let's pause these issues and discuss about hunger, the pain the people are going through, the economic hardships. But if you look at all the issues, a good number, even a slap in the face of the people of Kenya. How do you tell the people of Kenya that you are dying in the streets, that we may create an office for the Prime Cabinet Secretary? Shame on you. How do you tell the people of Kenya that you are dying in the streets, that we may create an office of the leader of official opposition? Shame on you. Shame on you. Including those on the government side that campaigned on a platform of the other side, wanaongea vyeo vya wakubwa. Sisi tunaongea mambo ya raia. Sasa mmeshikana mikono mnaongea juu ya vyeo vya wakubwa. Shame on you, all of you. On the list of the issues, Affirmative Action Fund, Senate Oversight Fund, entrenching CDF. How can you entrench a legality? You cannot cure the issue of CDF, never. Not just because the High Court ruled it unconstitutional. Not just because the Court of Appeal affirmed it. Not just because the Supreme Court categorically stated CDF is unconstitutional. But it's because it's common sense. The people of Kenya give government the power to spend money through the executive. The executive asks Parliament authority to raise the taxes. Parliament gives the executive the money. The executive spends, Parliament plays oversight role. How can Parliament join government in spending money? Who will play the oversight role? Then why can't we do without Parliament? Let's do away with Parliament then. Then the executive can spend our money. After all, we have elected the president. We can trust him to spend the money without oversight. So let's abolish Parliament. You cannot, on the altar of popularity, both the government and opposition, you cannot, on the altar of popularity, entrench unconstitutional provisions into our constitution. People died for this constitution. Careers were lost. People were maimed. Communities were persecuted. There's hardly anything that's being discussed at Bomas worth the sweat, leave alone the blood that Kenyans shed in the streets. Nothing. More shame from Bomas. That the only thing that will come from Bomas is some prime cabinet thing for some individual. More annoying, more disturbing, more embarrassing. And shame on you people. Will be the leader of official opposition in a presidential system. So who will the leader of opposition be checkmating? Ruto or Mudavadi? This is not a parliamentary system. The people who bastardized BBI should be reminded that you oppose this thing. If, however, you have changed your mind and you are free to change your mind, let's look at BBI. Let's have a conversation around the structure of government. Let's decide whether we go parliamentary or remain presidential, or whether we can have a hybrid system instead of sneaking some provisions in the constitution for which many Kenyans died. It will even be so hurting. Many people will shed tears to see perhaps Raila Odinga and Kalonzo Musyoka and maybe even Mother Karua fighting for that office. That is the day I will want to leave this country. The people I value so much and respect, like Raila Odinga, are beginning to let us down. But because we love this country, because we have children to whom we must leave a good country, we owe it to the children we have and their children. We owe it to generation. I will urge Dr. Green, Kalua, P.O. Lumumba, civil society, the church, and other players not to allow Parliament with the political leadership of this country to hijack this moment. Because this is a moment we must use to hold a national conversation, to once and for all address the political question, to address the issue of how come, with all the good things in this country, we remain a poor third world country. The question of how we can write our politics for the purposes of economic development and prosperity. I invite Kalua, PLO, and all those other people, civil society, the church, and other players to take over at Bomas and give this country a national charter that will provide hope, and not to allow these shortcuts, these clever games that are going to play out at Bomas.